He left his memo pad, the son of a bitch. I spent a week working, starting with 2 pages, his in mind, and ending up with 3 notebooks filled with diagrams and theorems and equations. I had to brush up on my calculus, my sociology, my IT, my quantum theory. Okay, I wasn't brushing up on quantum theory, but I had devoured 3 books on the subject, and it wasn't until halfway through the 3rd one that I knew what the hell I was working towards. Or at least I had some inkling. There was an answer somewhere in my mind, something about the connection between the nature of thought and the entanglement of fundamental particles. I was in so far over my head I dropped sessions. I ignored Mike when he wanted to get lunch every other day for 3 days until he called me an asshole. Maybe worse things, I don't know. I didn't care. I was so close. To what? Finally, it was time to meet with Dr. Jonas Cliver again. I shook his hand warmly when he arrived and led him to the couch. His hand was thin and cold, and I studied his face, lean, haggard, drained, but he was smiling. He ignored the cigarettes and got right to the talking. "You've been thinking about our conversation," he said. "I have." I was breathless, desperate, needy. God, was I horny? No, I wasn't that crazy, but the need was similar, the ache, located a bit higher than with lust, like there was a word on the tip of my tongue, fluttering, unable to escape. "You want to hear more?" Jonas said. "Yeah." God, how unprofessional. The worst part is finding money. How stupid is that? I remember thinking that I could see the future course of the war reduced to a few equations. I had mastered the principles behind rocketry inside of a month, and I didn't have any damn money. After the war, though, the cash really started to flow for anyone with brains enough to put together a slideshow and explain how it would help against the communists. I came to the States, found Reggie again, and he introduced me to the college. "What was that?" I asked. I had pulled myself together. I was taking notes again. Out of principle, I wrote, "Delusion without paranoid behavior," in the upper left corner. The College of Scholastic Theory, the Invisible College is what they used to call it, one of the 5 major groups, foundations, that brought people like me together. Together, they made up the peerage, a sort of loose social group among our kind of people. Geniuses? In a word, they helped me focus. They taught me what I could do, what I was, and they showed me how to jump on the gravy train. It was a good time to be alive because most of the bad guys were dead. Bad guys? I asked the little question mark next to paranoid. When you create a wonder, there's always a theory behind it, a system. You've been thinking about systems, I think. When we were young and the mania swirls around us like a storm, we try to find a philosophy that explains what we can do. But they're all vacuous nonsense. That's the big horrible joke. There's no accommodating genius, no explaining it. Genius is a non-repeating phenomena, a miracle every time. None of those scholars at the college with their slide rules and tables of logs and test tubes were scientists. They were just playing with the trappings of science, like some kid waving around a toy gun and scaring the rest of the playground. We got results, but that's all we had. Results. There was no system, just mania crackling at our fingertips. But not everyone could believe that. It's hard to realize that what you're doing is a sham. He stared into my eyes. He looked all hazy and miserable again, and I felt his ragged anger at the truth. We have to face up to the truth about ourselves, I said. Some of us can't. They think they have an answer. They think they have the answer. He looked at me again. They don't. We don't. You don't. Dr. Ibanez. So don't get any silly ideas or you'll end up like them. Them? I added another question mark to paranoid. The Lemurians. They think they have the answer. They think they have a system that makes sense. He shook his head. Not much makes sense to me anymore, and those things that do make sense. I'm not certain enough about them to kill for them, but you get so afraid. You start thinking it's all pointless, and then they're all laughing at you, telling you you are insane, and that you get hard. Of course, you're fucking right. You're not crazy. No one who can reignite the spark of life in a corpse, no one who can run their hands through the cold red sand of another world, can get there with a wrong-headed idea about how the world works, right? There's a lot of anger there in Lemuria. Still, especially after they lost the war. We sat in silence for a moment. I felt like a new hole was being drilled inside my skull. For an eye to look out, or for a mouth to speak form, it hurt like hell. I felt my notebook slide from numb hands. It's not pleasant, Dr. Cliver said. You know what's happening, don't you? Just keep talking, I snapped. The Lemurians are bitter. Of course, I suppose I'm bitter. There's a changelessness in a genius, as if something in our brains gets flash-fried at the moment of our breakthrough, like those shadows in Hiroshima. When a new genius is born, it's not just a cool, logical revelation. I remember how bitter I was, as bitter as any Lemurian, when I was at Bleckley Park and I watched myself getting outclassed by every code breaker and mathematician and high school algebra teacher that they brought there. I was jealous, and that jealousy stamped me forever. Every genius has a catalyst. I am a need. Jealousy, bitterness, resentment. It's always there in the back of my mind, but you deserve better. You're going insane by inches, Dr. Ibanez, Dr. Cliver said. You can feel it like a fever in your mind, like weevils eating your brain. I'm not mad, I said. No, he said. I'm the one on the couch, and you know that when meeting insane people, it's best to pretend to be sane, right? A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. What? Things weren't making a lot of sense. Everything seemed unique. I could form no patterns, no systems. Nothing had anything in common with anything else. The universe seemed to consist entirely of solitary objects without pattern. Everything was a non-repeating phenomena. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, Dr. Cliver replied. It's a simple proverb. What does it mean? I knew what he was doing. I was by no means an expert in schizophrenia, but I was familiar with the symptoms: blunted affect, disorganized speech, and the thinking. No one system by itself is evidence of schizophrenia. No one thing by itself is evidence of... The proverb, Dr. Cliver said. What does it mean? It means the bird in the hand stands for your inner character, I said. While the outer world seems larger, the inner world... No, that wasn't entirely clear. I tried again. It means that what you understand is more important than what you do. I felt naked as Dr. Cliver stared at me. He looked sympathetic, but I could only imagine him shaking his head. Am I getting it wrong? I asked. I feel like You're close to the mark, Dr. Cliver said. If you were a school teacher instead of a psychiatrist, I'd praise you for your non-standard reasoning abilities. Like I was the teacher and you were the student, but instead, I'll act like I'm the shrink and you're the patient. You're displaying evidence of a schizophrenic thinking disorder. I was drowning. No, air. I don't want this, I said. If you didn't want this, you shouldn't have spent all last week trying to figure out the true nature of thought. You shouldn't have started building that thing that you think can glimpse the thoughts behind the thoughts. The syncopated concepts that piggyback on what we call consciousness. Dr. Cliver sat up. You deduced their existence, and now you want to see them. You want to see the world of inspiration, to see that light face to face. I don't. It hurts. You do. It's going to hurt a lot more, and it will always hurt. His eyes were atomic fire. I want this, I said.